I learned something the hard way that night, something nobody ever tells you when you're young and trying to survive. Staying quiet doesn't always keep you safe. Sometimes it just makes you invisible, and invisible people are the easiest ones to sacrifice. It started with 2 words. That's all it took. 2 words spoken in the wrong tone at the wrong table to the wrong man. And those 2 words almost got me fired, almost got me hurt, and somehow ended up changing my entire life. This is fake. Yeah, that happened. Before that moment, I was nobody. Or at least that's how everyone saw me. 25 years old, working as a server in one of those luxury restaurants where the lighting is low, the wine costs more than your rent, and powerful people make decisions that never affect people like you. I wore the uniform, smiled on cue, kept my eyes down, learned how to disappear between tables. I was good at it too. You kinda have to be if you want to last. The funny thing is, disappearing was a skill I learned on purpose. Years earlier, I wasn't invisible at all. I was loud in classrooms, sharp in debates, the kind of student professors remembered. I had been studying law, contract law, specifically the boring stuff people think is just paperwork, but actually decides who gets rich and who gets ruined. I loved it. I was good at it. And then life happened the way it always does. My mother got sick. Not the kind of sick that gets better with rest and optimism. The kind that turns hospitals into a second home and bills into a permanent state of panic. I left school. I took the job that paid the fastest. And I told myself it was temporary, just until things stabilized. You probably know how that goes. Temporary turns into years, and years turn into a version of yourself you barely recognize. So there I was, blending into the background when a private room booking came in one rainy Thursday night. The manager pulled me aside, voice tight, eyes sharp. High-profile guests, no mistakes, no questions. Just serve and vanish. The man who arrived first was the kind of wealthy you don't see on Instagram. Quiet money, controlled movements. He walked like he owned not just the room, but the building, maybe the street. Everyone else reacted instantly, straightened posture, lowered voices. I didn't know his name then. I just knew power when I felt it. A few minutes later, the others showed up. 2 well-dressed partners, all smiles and confidence, carrying a leather case like it held something sacred. They spoke in that polished tone people use when they're about to ask for a lot of money and expect you to say yes. I poured water. I refilled glasses. I wasn't supposed to listen, but when you've spent years studying how people hide lies in legal language, your brain doesn't really turn that off. It hums quietly in the background, picking up patterns, noticing what doesn't fit. They opened the case. Inside was an old document, yellowed paper, ornate, sealed dramatic presentation. They talked about legacy heritage, historic rights numbers big enough to make your stomach flip. I felt it before I could explain it. That tightening in your chest when something looks right but feels wrong. They explained the deal. Transfer of assets. Signature at the bottom. The man with the money picked up his pen. That's when my heart started racing, because the words they were using didn't belong together. The structure was wrong. The phrasing was modern, dressed up to sound old. It's like hearing someone claim they're from the 1800s while checking a smartphone. Subtle, but impossible once you notice it. I had seconds, maybe less. My brain did the math faster than I could stop it. If I spoke up, I'd lose my job. I'd embarrass people who clearly didn't like being embarrassed. If I stayed quiet, a man was about to lose everything based on a lie. I thought about my mother, about how many times doctors told us the truth mattered even when it hurt. And before I could talk myself out of it, the words were already leaving my mouth. This is fake. The room froze. You could feel it like the air had thickened. Every eye turned toward me, the waitress who wasn't supposed to exist. One of the partners laughed sharp and dismissive. Another snapped something about staying in my lane. Security shifted. And the man with the pen looked at me slowly, carefully, like he was reassessing the entire room. He asked me who I was. I told him the truth. That I served tables, that I used to study law, and that the document was fraudulent. I explained it piece by piece, voice shaking at first, then steadier as muscle memory kicked in. The wrong terminology. The anachronisms. The mistakes only someone rushing or assuming no one would check would make. Silence followed. Long, uncomfortable silence. One of the partners went pale. The other started talking too fast. The man with the money didn't interrupt them. He just listened, eyes never leaving mine. Then he asked for the document again, studied it, and set it down gently. Too gently. He told them to leave. All of them. Just like that, the deal evaporated. Security escorted them out, protests fading down the hallway. And suddenly, it was just me and the man I had almost warned too late. I expected anger. I expected to be fired on the spot. Instead, he poured a drink and slid it across the table. "You're not invisible anymore," he said quietly. I laughed because what else do you do when adrenaline finally lets go? He asked why I spoke up. I told him the truth again. Because I couldn't not. Because I'd already given up too much by staying silent in my own life. He offered me a job that night. Not charity. Work. Real work. Finding lies. Stopping people like the ones who just walked out. Here's the part people argue about in the comments. Some say it's unrealistic. That this kind of thing doesn't happen. And maybe they're right. Because what came next was worse. A few days later, we discovered the fraud went deeper. Someone close. Someone trusted. The kind of betrayal that doesn't shout. It whispers. When the confrontation finally happened, it wasn't dramatic until it was. Voices raised. Accusations laid bare. And then fear, real fear when a line got crossed that couldn't be uncrossed. I remember the sound more than anything else. A loud crack. The kind you don't immediately register as danger until you see someone fall. Everything blurred after that. Training, I didn't know I had kicked in. Pressure on wounds, shouting for help, seconds stretching into eternity. He survived. Barely. The fallout was brutal. Arrests, headlines, courtrooms. I testified. I told the truth again even when my voice shook. The same people who once looked through me were suddenly asking for statements, for interviews, for explanations. But here's the thing, no article ever really captured. The real victory wasn't the arrest or the exposure or the money saved. It was the moment I realized my voice mattered. That being underestimated didn't make me weak. It made me dangerous to people who relied on silence. I didn't go back to serving tables. I didn't go back to being invisible. And no life didn't suddenly become perfect. Healing takes time. Trust takes longer. But I stopped apologizing for taking up space. So here's why I'm telling you this. Because every day someone like me is standing in a corner holding their tongue, convincing themselves it's safer not to speak. And maybe sometimes it is. But sometimes silence is exactly what the wrong people are counting on. So what do you think? Was it reckless to speak up, or was staying quiet? The real danger. Have you ever seen something wrong and hesitated because of who you were or where you stood? Tell me in the comments. I read them. And if this story made you feel seen, share it with someone who needs the reminder. Sometimes 2 words are enough to change everything.